Today on Reef Talk, I'm going to tell you all about dosing. I'm going to tell you what it is, whether or not you need to do it, and if so, how you go about doing it, all in the simplest possible way to understand. Hey guys, it's Alex here, and if this is your first time at the channel, I put out a video every week with tips on how to set up and maintain an awesome reef tank. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Right, let's get to it. When we talk about dosing, we're talking about the big three things that corals absolutely must have to survive and grow. Those three things are alkalinity, calcium and magnesium. So if you keep corals or plan to keep corals, you need to know about dosing. When you read about dosing, you'll see terms like two-part balling method and Triton method. And while there are differences between some of these, they all achieve the same goal of adding alkalinity, calcium and magnesium to your aquarium. With dosing, the alkalinity, calcium and magnesium are separated out into either 2 or 3 solutions, with some methods combining calcium and magnesium into one bottle and others keeping them separate. There's no right way of doing it as such, and both methods still achieve the same goal. Examples of dosing options commonly available are Red Sea Reef Foundation, ATI Essentials and Essentials Pro, Tropic Marine Balling Classic and Balling Light, Fauna Marine Balling Classic and Balling Light, Triton and Aquaforest Components 1, 2 and 3. Now all of these are slightly different, some are more concentrated, some come in part powder form, some in liquid form, some contain beneficial trace elements and some have optional trace elements that you can buy separately. But when you're first starting out with dosing, the choice of which of these you use probably isn't that important. You might decide which one to choose because you've seen great tanks running that particular option, because one option seems more simple, because you prefer 2 bottles to 3, or just because you trust the brand. Either way, you can achieve great results with any of these, so while you should of course do your research before you start, I wouldn't worry too much about which option you choose, and it's probably not as simple as saying one is better than the other. So that's what dosing is then, but how do you know whether or not you need to dose? Now that's an easy question to answer, as you will almost certainly need to start dosing at some point if you want to run a successful reef tank. If you only have soft corals, you probably don't need to dose in the short to medium term, and you can probably get away with carrying out regular weekly water changes instead, particularly if you use a high concentration salt like Red Sea Coral Pro. Salts like Red Sea Coral Pro have higher levels of alkalinity, calcium and magnesium, so they will replenish what your corals use to an extent. The same is just about true if you only have a few small stony coral frags, but that will change as they grow, and the better approach is to look at what will make your corals thrive, not just the bare minimum for them to survive short term. If you're only doing 10% weekly water changes, that's unlikely to replenish everything your corals use, so over time your levels will drop and could get dangerously low. And if you rely on water changes to replenish your alkalinity, calcium and magnesium, your parameters will drop over the course of the week, then spike when you do your water change. Corals thrive on stability more than almost anything, so that's not ideal. And even in soft coral tanks, things like coralline algae and snail shells will deplete alkalinity, calcium and magnesium. So because these big three things are so fundamental to keeping a reef tank, realistically if you want to keep corals, you will need to start dosing at some point, and the sooner you start the more your corals will appreciate it. It's a good idea to think of dosing as being as important for your coral's health as putting food in the tank is for your fish's health. But there's an easy way to see all this for yourself. Just test your alkalinity, calcium and magnesium at the same time every week, and if any of those three are dropping despite your water changes, you need to start dosing. Testing at the same time of day is important to establish the true position, as your levels will change over the course of the day, and you can expect alkalinity to drop the most, followed by calcium then magnesium. So let's talk about how to start dosing. First you'll need to decide what brand you want to go for. I use ATI Essentials Pro, which includes trace elements and comes in 2 bottles that you simply dilute with RO water, then plug into your dosing pump. It's also balanced, so you should end up dosing the same quantity from each bottle, which isn't true of all solutions. But any of the options I've mentioned will be fine, and things like Balling Classic or Red Sea Foundation are easy ways of getting started, with plenty of information and instructions available online. Once you've chosen your brand, you'll then need to establish how much you need to dose. There are various calculators available online, such as on ultimatereef.net or on the Bulk Reef Supply website, and the instructions for whatever method you use should also provide you with some more specific guidance. But the calculators aren't always completely accurate, as they rely on you knowing the precise water volume in your system, which can be difficult to calculate accurately.
So the best way is to test your alkalinity, calcium and magnesium as often as you can and at least once a week. Then start dosing a very small amount of maybe even a couple of millilitres of each solution once a day. Then test again to see how your parameters have changed. If they've increased, you'll need to dose less, and if they've dropped, you'll need to dose more. Simple. If you're on a budget, you can simply measure out the amounts you need to dose each day and manually add them to your tank. But that does become a bit of a hassle, so it's far better to get a dosing pump to do the legwork for you. A dosing pump will also split the daily dose into several small doses to ensure your levels stay as stable as possible. And it will work when you're away from home, so you don't have to worry about what will happen when you go on holiday. Dosing pumps don't have to be expensive, and there are plenty of second-hand options available. Even a brand new Chinese Jekod dosing pump will only set you back around £80. But if you can stretch a little more, you'll get better usability, accuracy and reliability from brands like GHL, Neptune or H2 Ocean. As to what levels you should aim for, stability is more important than the actual number, but if you plan on doing water changes, it's probably a good idea to aim for the parameters of the salt you use. With Red Sea Blue Bucket, for example, that's alkalinity of 8 DKH, calcium of 430 parts per million, and magnesium of 1280 parts per million. Researching dosing can get pretty complicated and scientific, and there's more to it than the points I've covered in this video, particularly when you start looking at things like trace elements and ICP testing. But that's really not essential, and the points I've covered are all you need to know to get started with dosing. All I dose in my tank is ATI Essentials Pro, which is just 2 bottles with no separate trace elements or additives. And while ATI Essentials encourages you to send off water samples for analysis, that's not absolutely necessary, and you absolutely can get great results while still keeping things nice and simple.
If you've got any questions then leave them in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next week, and until next time, happy reefing.